Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 51, Swift Death Exposed. Swift Death. Roy called out to his new maid. Yes. Here. Take it. She turned around, only to see him summoning out of thin air a shiny thing and throwing it her way. Ow! She grabbed it, but it was so heavy that she fell on her butt. So, a yell of pain escaped her little red lips. Opening her eyes, she saw what it was. Is this really happening to me? She disbelieved what she saw for a moment. But the reality was that on her lap laid a chest full of gold. Her heart warmed, and her eyes swam with tears. Her hardened expression shattered as she looked up at her new master. Are you really giving it to me? Roy merely gave her a silent nod. Under his gaze, her lashes fluttered, batting up and down, causing the tears shimmering in her eyes to drop down. If anyone were to see Swift Death's current state, they would think he had done something facetious to her. Recognition dawned on Roy's face. She really is a femme fatale. My life isn't going to be easy with her around. As tears ran down her cheeks, she asked, sobbing, why? Her voice cracked up, stopping her from completing the question she wanted to ask Roy. Why has your mind changed? Roy could, however, tell she wanted to ask him this. I can't tell her that I know of her pitiful circumstances and that the life and death of innocent lives rest on her shoulder. I better think of something else, but, what? He coughed to buy some time. Because I am your master. What other reason do I need? Roy replied frankly after a moment. His reason flabbergasted her. Since my sister died, you are the second person to help me. Thanks. While crying more loudly than before, Swift Death said that and smiled unrestrainedly. It wasn't like the fake smile she had been putting on her face since he became her master, but a real genuine one that came straight from the heart. Too beautiful. Roy felt enchanted with the sight of a lovely smile blooming on a teary person who sat amongst the snow. But he snapped back to reality quickly, for he couldn't fall in love in this world where the life and death of everyone was undecided. Thank you very much. Swift Death thanked this new master of her for the goodwill he had shown her once again. For Roy, 1 gold chest wasn't much. He had 9 in his subspace and many other treasures. But for Swift Death, it was a game changer. With the gold in this chest, not only would she be able to keep her life by paying the fine for failing to complete a mission, but she would also be able to buy medicine for her kids. Roy waved his hand nonchalantly. Don't mention it. Swift Death wiped the tears off her face. What do you want me to do, master? She was finally treating him like her master. Roy had earned this. Keep working for them. I want an insider. But you don't have to hide that you're under my wings from them. Their information network is too strong. So, they would find out sooner or later anyway. And yes, do come to the manor tomorrow to do your duty as my maid. Swift Death elegantly bowed to him. As you wish. Roy and Swift Death went separate ways. She went to the Yama's hideout in the county first. Yama's contractor met her at the entrance. He immediately stepped 6 meters away from Swift Death before composing himself, then smiled at her, who had worn the mask of a man, pleasantly and asked, Did you hit or miss your mask? No, I am here to apply for the cancellation of my assassination on Sir Roy. This was said by Swift Death in the manliest voice possible. Oh, so you're here for that. You know the code. Go to the back room. Accept your punishment without resistance. It's not my desire but the Nether Duke's rule. Breaking them would ask for a heavier price from you. So, I advise you to be thoughtful. The Yama's gate was a harsh place. Swift Death didn't want to be hunted down by her kind. She knows what sleepless nights do to one's mind. She walked into the punishment room, and the contractor followed her. There, he whipped her 10 times. She bit her lips and endured them. You may go. Swift Death stood up and glared at the Yama's contractor. He remained unflinching under her murderous reddish gaze. She looked heavenward, breathing out a sigh, and walked out. Only then did the Yama's contractor drop to his knees and take off his mask, revealing a face full of sweat. His back was equally drenched. Fuck, when she looked at me, I felt as if a monster was going to chomp my body in half. I should really consider changing my jobs. After leaving the hideout, Swift Death went to the White Wizard Guild and purchased elixirs that were of a purple color. These were fed to her adopted children, and they were cured of their plague overnight. We no longer need to stay in confinement. Hooray! I can go to the park tomorrow, right? Yes. Thank you, Father. Swift Death smiled gently at the 8 to 13 years old kids and embraced them all in one big hug. She had everything like fame in the underworld, power, and prestige of being a member of the Nether Gate, but that didn't fill her with a sense of fulfillment. Her accomplishment could never compile to replace these kids. They were the result of her sister's last sacrifice. Cherishing and protecting these kids make her feel like she's accomplishing something and living up to the expectations of her sister in heaven. The hollow in her heart was filled by the smile of these little ones. No one wanted these children. Some were sold by their parents. Some were war orphans. Some were abandoned on the streets. They had nowhere to return to. So, she took them in, acting as their caretaker. But she was so good to them that the younger ones among them had taken her for their father. Even they didn't know her real identity. This was a woman that had worn the face of a devilish man to change a small part of the world for the better and committed lesser evil for the greater good. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 52, Eldest. Roy returned, only to see someone so unexpected in his chamber that his jaw went slack. There was an unexpected visitor in his room. He was a male. His eyes were like a hawk's, and his hair matched a lion's mane. Grey-eyed, unlike his father, and golden-haired just like his mother, he was the eldest son of the fierce sword count and half a brother to Roy. The second Roy entered the room, Arthur's eyes darted to him. And also Amelia's. Thank God you're back in one piece. Seeing him, the tensed expression on her face shattered, and her mouth curved into a lovable smile. Ha! Arthur took in the sight of his family's youngest, finding him somewhat injured. His expression dimmed a little. You were injured. It looks like the assassin got to you, but I guess you fended him off somehow and escaped. There was a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. And no, he wasn't happy to see a person carrying the same blood as his injured. He was pleased for a different reason. Roy is indeed my half-brother. Even that assassin who escaped my grasp because I didn't take him seriously failed to assassinate him. Good, he's very good. He's a capable person and exceptionally talented, Arthur thought with glistening eyes. Hearing what Arthur said, Roy furrowed, and his brows drew closer, causing a line to appear between them. How do you know about it? He questioned Arthur. That's something you should ask your maid, Arthur said while placing his right leg over his left, acting comfortable like he wasn't in someone else's living quarters but his own home. Roy's eyes rolled out to Amelia. What happened while I was in the wilderness? Why would you know about the assassin? Why is Arthur here? With his gaze, he asked her these questions. Ah. Standing by his bedside and several meters away from him, Amelia looked like a lonely tree that had only recently stopped shedding leaves due to stress and worry. Well, an assassin broke into the manor while you were gone. Searching for you, he slipped past all the way here under everyone's nose and found me. I was threatened to expose your whereabouts. I kept mum. But that angered him, and he pulled out a dagger to force it out of me. Just then, Lord Arthur knocked on the door, asking for your permission to enter. After receiving a call for help, he broke into the room and confronted the assassin. The assassin ran away. But before jumping out the window, he threatened to harm you. Amelia fidgeted with her fingers, looking very nervous. She didn't know how to explain what happened next to her master. What happened then? After Roy questioned her, Amelia decided to come clean. Roy was her master, and she didn't want to hide anything from him. I was worried, so I commissioned a few knights to take down the assassin and be on the lookout for you in the streets. I paid them out of your pockets. I am sorry for doing things without your permission. Please forgive me. She bowed to him apologetically. Roy walked up to her and grabbed her shoulders. He found them soft and small, just like how women's should be. He immediately helped her stand straight and gave her a few light pats. It's all right. How can I blame you for worrying about me? Their eyes met. Roy forgot to speak for a second. Quote. But are you fine? Thank you for worrying about me, my master, but I'm unharmed, Amelia replied with a trace of an apologetic smile still on her face. Roy patted her head. A blush rose up her neck, reaching her cheeks. How could he treat me in such a special way in front of an outsider? Steam would have started coming out of her head if Roy hadn't noticed her flustered face and stopped patting her. I stayed behind in case the assassin returned, Arthur added from the sidelines. He felt like a third leg between two lovebirds. If not for the fact he had something to talk about with Roy, he would have left. Please go to the kitchen master and have him prepare some tea for us. Roy requested Amelia. Then, please excuse me. Amelia gave him a respectful bow and left the room to him and his brother. Roy turned to Arthur. This time, instead of giving him a suspicious and hard look, he looked at Arthur with a softer gaze. After finding out that this guy had helped his maid, Roy thought rumors about Arthur were not to be trusted. Arthur might not be a cruel marauder. He might actually be a good guy. But of course, that's something he had yet to confirm. Arthur raised his brow at the guy who was looking at him silently. You're looking at me like you've something to say. What is it? Roy was unsure of what to say to him. Thank you for protecting my maid. So he expressed his truest thought to him. He was honestly grateful that Arthur was there for his maid when he wasn't. It wasn't wrong for one to say that he was immensely grateful to Arthur, for he had helped Amelia. Although he was quite doubtful that Swift Death, who had failed 2 missions because she didn't have it in her to kill an innocent man, would harm an innocent, facts proved that he should be thankful in this situation. Arthur appreciated it. I was just doing my job. An assassin dared to break into our manor. If I had allowed him to take a life on top of that, our reputation would have been lost. It's just sad that I failed to stop him from escaping, and he even got to you. If something had happened to you, I would have failed my ancestors. But seeing how fine you're, my worries died down. This was said by Arthur in an elated tone. Any outsider listening to him would think he was happy to see that his brother had survived an assassination without getting severely injured. Roy was, however, still guarded against him. He didn't know why Arthur was being so good to him when in the past, he had been indifferent. But what are you still doing here? The assassin was long gone, so why had he remained behind? I was waiting for you. Why? To talk. Come. Take a seat. Arthur pointed at the seat opposite him. Roy had some apprehension about him, but he wanted to know his motives behind seeking him out. So, he sat down there and quietly looked at him. Arthur was aware of his distrustful gaze. I know you're wary of me. That's why you send your maid away. You don't need to be so guarded against me. I'm not like our second brother. I never have and would never pick on you without a good reason. But you do have a good reason to seek me out. I beat the man you wanted to take under your wing. Could it be, you're here to settle the score? Roy warily scrutinized the man opposite him. Arthur let off his relaxation pose and sat upright. He leaned forward, his expression stiffening. Something was up. Roy guessed it right. That street rat deserved the beating you gave him, Arthur said harshly. Some people were meant for the streets. Euron was one such person as he was a white-eyed wolf. Unlike the others, Arthur wasn't biased against Roy. Of course, he wasn't going to speak in favor of Euron. But Roy didn't expect him to be so direct. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 53, A Good Brother. Roy, nothing matters to me more than my family. I stand guard at the northern border year-round and stop the army of the Evernight from setting a foot inside the Empire for you and everyone in this county. But that bastard stepped on those very people using my name. I wanted to get rid of him a long time ago. Rather than blame, I must thank you for giving him a rude awakening. Arthur's fingers curled into a fist, and the desire to skin Euron alive was raging in his eyes. Roy felt a shiver down his spine when he glanced at his brother's eyes. Arthur's eyes were screaming fury and murder. Why didn't you? Roy questioned, his narrowed eyes falling on Arthur. Due to various reasons, I couldn't, Arthur sighed. The ruthless general that eradicates dark mages mercilessly and destroys hordes of undead valiantly was chained from killing a man that has earned his wrath. Do you expect me to believe that? Roy scoffed. Father stopped me. Roy was shocked to hear that from Arthur. What? But why? Roy questioned again. This time, Arthur didn't answer him. It's my turn to ask questions and your turn to answer them, okay? You were able to defeat him without anyone's help, right? Roy nodded. There's no lie in that. What do you think our family lacks the most? Roy really wanted to answer with this, decency, harmony, and humbleness. But he kept his thoughts to himself. Who knows if this marauder would lose his temper after hearing his true thoughts and swat him to death? I don't know, Roy answered after a moment. We lack talented youth who can participate in the adulthood ceremony under our family's name. It's to hit the Empire in 2 months. Arthur took a breath before continuing, just like every other time, the top 100,000 contestants would be given the Awakening Stone, and the top 100 will gain the right to undergo baptism on the Awakening platform. Roy knew about it too. The adulthood ceremony was a shitty tradition that came into being after the founding of the glorious Sun Empire. The royal family that had monopolized the greatest treasures in the far west used this event to differentiate the people worthy of awakening from the waste. 15 to 19 years old could participate in it. They would tackle trials and compete with others to earn the right to awaken. Usually, around 1 million youngsters take part in this event that's held every year, but only 100,000 get to awaken. The saddest part was that the descendants of commoners didn't stand a chance against nobles and royals who are fed treasures and taught by the best from a very young age and act as a group in the trials of the ceremony. So, to join such groups and not be ganged up on in the competition, the children of commoners with great martial or magical talents swear loyalty to people of status and become a part of their family before the ceremony. Roy concluded that this ceremony existed to force talented youths of poorer backgrounds into serving people of status. The royal family is not to be messed with. They're too scheming and controlling. The royal family wasn't viewed in a good light by Roy. You must be interested in participating in it this year, right? Yes, I am. Since that's the case, I will let you in on a secret only a few know. Arthur said, what most don't know is that the family of the top 100 contestants this year would gain mystic tokens to access a hidden realm that opens once 100 years. It would open up a year later. It's rumored to be full of treasure. Father has been lucky enough to come across this information during his venture to the capital years ago. Going there would be beneficial to Noah and me. The awakening of Noah, I, and our sister couldn't be delayed. But he calculated that you were to awaken this very year. You could earn that right for us, but because of your conditions, he didn't have any expectations of you. It's sad, but he didn't treat you like family even then. I don't know why he's so biased against you. But because we wouldn't have anyone to represent us in the ceremony this year, I went along with his wishes. We picked up war orphans from the street and purchased some others from starving families. We fed them, clothed them, and trained them for this very moment. Yuren was also trained for this purpose. You ask why our father stopped me from trashing him. Well, here's your answer. He was among our best hope of gaining the Hidden Realms entrance tokens. And we couldn't dissatisfy him. Or there was a chance of him going back on his words after getting them. That's why he couldn't be harmed or treated harshly. It hadn't been 2 decades since this county came into being. It was clear as day that it could not match families that have existed for hundreds of years. This was made more evident in the face of the adulthood ceremony. But they were desperate to contend with them. Thus, they took in outsiders with no background or fame and trained them. If that were all, it would have been fine. But they didn't screen them and accepted both good and evil. To think that even devils in human skin would be accepted into the family. The fierce sword count is too desperate for the tokens. Roy internally shrugged. Outwardly, he kept a composed face with no signs of cracking. You think too highly of him, Roy said. The Empire doesn't lack talent. There are thousands of people better than Yuren. I fought with him, so I know he wouldn't have made it in the top 1,000, let alone the top 100. He wasn't met with a retort from Arthur. You're right. Rather, Arthur agreed with him. I knew he wouldn't go far in the ceremony without my help. Arthur took out a palm-sized bottle. Inside it was a yellow liquid that was as shiny as gold under the light. Quote. That's why I got this for him. Roy's eyes widened to the size of saucers when he saw it. This is the nectar of the sun. A glance was all it took for him to recognize it. Amusement transformed Arthur's rather stern face. You recognize it? Roy nodded in Arthur's direction. I read about it in a book. He went on to explain its effects to Arthur. The nectar of the sun could be taken as an upgraded version of the fruit of light. It was packed with violent energy. This much amount can be taken by a trainee over 7 days to level up no less than 4 times. Roy was at the mythical level of body tempering. His aura gate was fully opened. He could use this to increase the size of his inner world. The greater its size, the more the amount of aura, inner energy he would be able to store inside it. Arthur, of course, didn't know that. It was ridiculous to imagine that a person could go from level 5 to beyond level 10 within a month. To him, Roy was still at the 5th stage of body tempering. Impressive. It looks like you've been doing more than just training. Yes, it's as beneficial as you say. This was meant for Yuren. It would have pushed him to the high levels of body tempering. He lost the right to have it because of being too arrogant and vicious. He has been judged for his crimes and sent to the gallows. Tomorrow would be his execution. Roy interrupted him before he could complete his sentence. Yuren is going to get executed. Arthur tapped the armrest of the chair and looked out the window before opening his mouth. His past crimes were unearthed. He had done a lot of inexcusable things. So, of course, he is. Yuren had forced himself on many poor ladies of the nearby villages and was physical with the old and young. This troublemaker was finally judged for his crimes after he was of no use to the Count. What a merciless family. He was to get executed tomorrow. It was a fitting end for an abusive man drunk on power that didn't treat humans with a status lesser than him as humans. Let's not talk about that guy. I came here to give you a surprise. It would be a waste for me to take the nectar of the sun. And so, I would like to give it to you. You'll feel a little ache when you use this to force open your aura gate. But the benefits will definitely outweigh the cons. You might even get pushed to the peak of body tempering overnight. Arthur said to Roy, surprising him immensely. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 54, bonus chapter, never say no to free stuff. Arlo had muddied the rumors about Roy. The people who believe what they want thus refused to take Roy seriously. His reputation was still bad as ever in the county. If not for the fact that Arthur had met up with the knights who were present at the training ground that day, he wouldn't be so sure that Roy was at the 5th level. But even then, how did it warrant him to treat Roy so good when there were trainees at the 6th and 7th levels under his wing? What about the other trainees? Why are you considering me over them? Roy was curious about why he was chosen to be the carry in the upcoming competition by this brother of his. They don't carry our blood. Who knows if they would betray us or refuse to honor the promises made in the future? Arthur was rather distrustful of outsiders. He might have old scars from getting betrayed by a close person. That's why he's so hesitant about trusting them. Roy judged Arthur as a rather pessimistic and guarded man. I did rather trust you, my kin, than them. Arthur pointed at him. You're a heaven-sent gift to our family. I want to trust my future and the honor of the Baldwins on your shoulder. If you're willing to uptake this responsibility, well, you'll be rewarded handsomely. This elixir will just be the down payment. I'll give you more things in the future. Roy immediately grabbed his hands. I won't let you down. Arthur looked up, only to see him beaming at him. You're accepting my proposal that easily? He was a bit taken aback by Roy's sudden exclamation. Shouldn't he be putting up an attitude at this moment? Why is he giving in so easily? Arthur's eyebrows raised. Why, Roy questioned, did you expect me to push forth a refusal in the face of this? It was such a good deal. He only needed to earn the entrance token for this brother of his. Well, since he was strong enough to dominate a section of the competition, it could be made possible. And since he was getting a rare treasure for something that was inevitable, he would have to be a fool to not accept it. Not to mention, he wanted to get strong as fast as possible to stand a chance against the chaos. I thought you would give me attitude, so I had my advisor prepare a long list of ways to make you agree. Threats, taking close ones as hostages, and whatnot. Every way to set straight a child throwing a tantrum is in it. But, I guess I no longer need it, Arthur said before tearing apart the paper that he had just taken out from his chest pocket. Roy's eyes bulged. It wasn't without reason people cursed Arthur out as a cruel man, a tormentor. He was far more vicious than a devil when needed to be. Those who have experienced his viciousness firsthand knew well not to offend him. Roy would have experienced firsthand what made this guy terrifying if he had made the wrong decision. I'm very thankful that you put your trust in me. I have been short-sighted. I admit that. I should have dealt with Yuren while keeping the benefits of the family in my mind. So, I also want to apologize for the mishap I've caused you as well. Please accept my apology, elder brother. Roy was sincere when apologizing to Arthur. Thus, he earned Arthur's admiration. He has a few shortcomings, but he's willing to change himself. His personality may not be the best, but it's better than mine. Forget about agreeing. I wouldn't bother talking to a person that has neglected me for years. But he has put his personal feelings aside for a better future. He has a better character than me. Arthur judged Roy as someone better than himself. Apology accepted. Then, good brother of mine, I will be taking this. Roy took the nectar of sun out of Arthur's grip. He held it like he was holding his newborn baby, carefully and attentively. And looked at it lovingly. It was too precious. He dared not be rough with it. Arthur found him silly and thought he was making a mistake. Is it too late to go back on my words? Caw. Caw. Suddenly, a black crow flew in through the window. Roy was about to smash its head, thinking it was a threat, but Arthur signaled him to calm down. Is this yours? Roy asked, pointing at the crow circling above. Arthur replied, yeah. It's a messenger that I own. It looks like a crow, but it's a magic beast. It understands human language and can store things 10 times bigger than its size without a hitch. Then, he frowned, but it's only used as a medium to urgently pass military secret. Why would it be here? Arthur was a general stationed at the northern border of the Empire. Beyond that was uncharted land where existed the worst nightmares of the human race. This crow was only used to send out military messages. Since it appeared here, it could only mean trouble back there. The crow sat on Arthur's shoulder and spat out a scroll larger than its body. It was taken and opened up by Arthur. Whatever was written on it didn't sit well with him, and he jumped up from his seat. Deep creases appeared on his forehead. You bastard, we treated you like a brother, and you betrayed us. How dare you? Endless rage surged out of Arthur. The betrayal of a trusted subordinate was too much for him to bear. Roy felt that an earthquake had hit a manor as he could feel the floor beneath his feet trembling and the bed and the shelves of his room shaking. But this was all caused by Arthur losing control over his emotions. Brother, calm down before you destroy our house. Roy shouted this at Arthur. Only then did the redness in his eyes recede, and he withheld the anger in his heart from exploding. Sorry, my bad. I couldn't control my emotions there for a second. Arthur was man enough to admit his faults and seek forgiveness when he was in the wrong. Roy found that characteristic of him to his liking. He pointed at the crumbled scroll in Arthur's hand and curiously spoke. What does it says? A fool joined hands with the Evernight, forsaking his humanity and becoming an undead. He was a high-ranking soldier from my division. That bastard, he has run into the uncharted land in search of the 13's commanders. I will be punished if that bastard found even one of them and exposed the secrets of our military to it. The chief commander had summoned all the generals stationed in the north to stop him. Add that includes me. I will be going out of the Empire's boundary to hunt him. I will be setting out immediately. Give my regards to father and tell him my reasons for not being home to greet my fiancée. Okay. Arthur used the window as an exit and shot to the sky. He was flying without the support of any item. The fact that he could fly said a lot about him. He was at least an aura grandmaster. This was 2 realms above a weapon master. I may, if I ever get to meet him, Roy muttered under his breath as the figure of Arthur blurred out of his sight. Right then. Master Tilda, I've brought tea. A sweet voice rang in his ears. He turned around and saw Amelia walking in through the open doors with a tray in her hand. You're a bit late. She set them on the table while looking around. Ah, where did Lord Arthur go? She asked Roy. Roy pointed his finger north. He left to tend to important duties. But, I had tea prepared for 2. Amelia said this while serving him a cup of tea. Roy smiled at her guiltily. I'm not too thirsty, so you'll have to help yourself to one, or it will go to waste. And so, Amelia was forced to relax and enjoy tea time with her master. Leveling Endlessly with the Strongest System Chapter 55, Red Hall. Has been edited. Arthurs explains some of what happened at the border. About 300 words were added. So if you read it just when it was published, you may like rereading it. ... Welcome to the Red Hall, Sir Roy. Knowing full well who he was, a pudgy man greeted Roy, who had just entered the shop where beasts are skinned and dismembered. Red Hall, what a fancy name for a butcher's shop, Roy muttered under his breath. He turned to the fat man with a smile and spoke. Forgive me for not recognizing you. Who are you? Roy was from the lower ranks of the upper class. Of course, you wouldn't know of him. Thus, the pudgy man wasn't annoyed with him. It's understandable that you wouldn't know of me. The manager stabbed the name tag on his chest with his finger thrice and thumped his chest in pride, and spoke again. I'm the manager of this place. Roy's gaze fell on this person's name tag, and he memorized his name. Oh, so you're Deborah. It's great to see you. I am usually called Deb by my colleagues and friends. That's my nickname. I don't mind getting called that from you, sir. Then, I'll call you that too, Deb. They shook hands. The first meeting between these two went quite pleasant. Have you completed my order? Yes. You were our top priority, so we worked extra hard to find the skin, the bone, and cut the meat of all 120 goods. They are preserved in the storage room. The beast cores we got from them are set aside on the shelves of that very room. Now, please allow me to guide you there, Deborah said as he walked inside the Red Hall. All right, lead me there. Roy gave him a nod and followed after him. The manager was being suspiciously humble to Roy. He felt that Deborah was up to something. But he soon realized that he was being suspicious of an honest and humble man for no reason. Open hollow corner bracket. You've gained materials extracted out of the corpses of the Snow Wolf leader and the Lunar Wolf and more than 100 Snow Wolves. Close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket. You've gained 27 low-level beast cores. Close hollow corner bracket. What do you want us to do with their innards? Deborah asked after completing Roy's order. Roy patted the manager's shoulder. Deborah saw a satisfied smile on his face. Then, he heard the words he had been waiting for. I'm satisfied with your performance. Your guys did a good job at handling my goods. Just treat it as my reward to you guys. Thank you for showing us kindness. Deborah thanked him. Innards might not mean much to Roy now that he had hundreds of thousands of gold coins in his pocket, but they could be sold for hundreds of silver coins. Which was a lot for these guys who made a living doing honest work and had families to take care of. Roy's goods were stored in several dozens of boxes. It was impossible for one man to carry them. Thus, Deborah kindly extended a helping hand to Roy. Should we help deliver these items to your house? No need, Roy refused him calmly. But why? The butchers around the steel stable, who were cutting various goods, and Deborah were taken aback by Roy's words. Even an interspatial ring wouldn't have enough storage to store all of them. How was he planning to take so many things with him? Open. At this moment, they all heard a word. The next instant, what they saw filled them with a sense of absurdity. A black hole opened and devoured all of Roy's goods on the table in the split of a second before closing and disappearing into thin air. It all happened so fast that if they could no longer see the goods, they would have thought their eyes were playing tricks on him. Unbelievable. What the heck did I just see? Are my eyes playing a trick on me? Oh, or did that really happen? Facts prove it did. Deborah composed himself quickly. Roy expected nothing less of a person in the position of managing others. Deborah smiled at Roy and said, "It was pleasant doing business with you. If you ever need labor to dismember a batch of monsters, please think about us. We'll always put you above the others. You'll be our top priority. As they say, a customer is a god. But a customer who brings in years' worth of wealth is far above a god." Roy was bringing them business. That's why the manager was treating him so grandly. Hearing his suggestion, Roy's eyebrows jumped. Now that you mentioned it, I do have a few corpses of beasts that you can take care of. But the question is, are you willing? Anytime. With a merchant smile, Deborah excitedly rubbed his hands together. You won't go back on your words, right? Roy gave him a look that urgently asked for his confirmation. I wouldn't dare lie to you, Sir Roy. Deborah was fully confident that no matter how hard a task he forwards their way, he and his guys would be able to complete it. Roy smiled. This is what I had been waiting to hear. With that said, Roy snapped his fingers. Deborah felt a weird premonition in his heart. A black hole made its appearance out of thin air, attracting many gazers. Under the watchful eyes of several people, corpses of monsters spewed out of it, piling up to the size of a small hill. The jaw of every onlooker widened to the point where it threatened to drop to touch the ground. At the sight of it, Deborah also couldn't stand still, and his body trembled out of excitement. Roy watched his eyes widen beyond the size of saucers. They were bulging out so much that it made someone fear they would pop out of their sockets with a gentle tap on his back. Deborah had the most intense reaction to Roy's casual actions. Why? Well, these were the corpses of ferocious beasts, not magic beasts. How can one bring so many of them wherever he goes? Sir Roy, did you loot the county's treasury? Deborah asked Roy in a shocked voice. Roy chuckled. What a silly question. I still value my head. Count's son or not, that's a capital crime. Why would I do something that'll get me hanged? He turned to leave immediately after. As he walked away, he left behind these words, get them done in 3 days. I want to put their cause up for sale in the auction that is soon to take place in the county. You'll be paid handsomely. You won't be disappointed. We'll overwork overtime to get it done. Thank you for trusting us with this matter. The butchers exclaimed as they watched him leave. The business he had brought them would help them a lot. They would be paid extra. They were good at handling different types of beasts, but knights tended to avoid this place. Rather than entrusting their game to others, knights liked to do all the hard work themselves. But Roy, who did not want to waste his time dismembering hundreds of beasts, entrusted his hunts to them. He had used inspection on them and knew they could be trusted. Since he trusted them and brought them cash, he earned their gratitude. Have a good day, Sir Roy, Deborah said while bowing in Roy's direction. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 56, in the auction house, a gem. Roy wanted to sell most of his items as they were useless to him, and he wanted to free his subspace, but selling them in the open market wouldn't earn him 1/10 of what he would get from auctioning them. If you ask which is the best auction house of the neighboring dukedom, 999 out of 1,000 people would recommend the Golden Pixie auction house. Moreover, the Eastern Duke, a close friend of the only human emperor in the far west, is its backer. It could be said to be quite ambitious, as although it is the best in the Eastern Dukedom, it wants to become the best auction house in the entire empire. Thus, it started expanding outside its place of origin by opening up branches in the dukedoms and the Forbidden Capital. It didn't spare the Northern Dukedom, a place invested in the least, either. A branch of this auction house could be found in Baldwin County. Open hollow corner bracket. You've arrived at the Golden Pixie auction house. Close hollow corner bracket. Roy looked around and noticed 2 young ladies standing behind the counter. Makeup was applied to their faces, not in an excessive amount, but it was still noticeable. It suited them, though, and made them look lovely and livelier. They were wearing staff uniform that was intentionally made to be slightly revealing and tight. They both were fit and pleasant to look at. That's the first impression he had of them. Footsteps were heard from afar. They raised their head and saw a towering giant coming up to them. He was too big but gave off an air of confidence. They determined him to be a man of status, definitely not someone one could look down upon. Fleur pleasantly smiled at him as she said, "Hello, how may I help you?" "I would like to know when the next auction is going to take place," Roy asked in a calm voice. "We would be hosting it in 5 days. Fleur gave him a swift reply. "I can still participate in it, right?" Roy swallowed nervously. The list of the items to be auctioned would be spread throughout the county by dawn. "So, there are still some hours left before we stop registering sellers. You came at just the right time. If you're interested in putting items up for auction, you must let us know immediately. We would add their names to the list so the guests would know what to expect." Gaynor clarified the situation to him. Like her name, she had fair skin and a soft face. Her cheeks were so bubbly that anyone would feel an intense urge to squeeze them, but he held it in as he didn't want to be mistaken for a molester or a pervert. "I do have a lot to sell," Roy claimed with a raise of his head. "Then, please do show us the items you want to sell," Fleur said somewhat demandingly, her pretty purple eyes full of cat-like curiosity. For her unprofessionalism and dumb behavior, Gaynor pinched her waist, almost causing her to cry out. Fleur stopped her expression from contorting and kept an ideal on her face as she swatted her friend's naughty hand away. Roy didn't know this took place as this all happened under the table in a few seconds. "Giving just their name also works," Gaynor added. Roy gained a favorable impression of her. Gaynor was better than Fleur in many ways. She was cute and more professional than Fleur. And she was good at clarifying things to ignorant customers like Roy. "You can have a look." After saying that, Roy opened his subspace in front of them. It spat out multiple boxes of raw materials and a few rune stones on the table. Gaynor and Fleur weren't experiencing any change in expression at this sight. Roy's subspace could store more than an interspatial ring, but it wasn't anything special. It was mistaken for a rank 5 soul shard. He knew that would be the case. That's why he was using it in the presence of others. "I'm finding it hard not to laugh at him. Is he a bumpkin? Doesn't he know this isn't a place to sell items only ordinary folks would use?" Fleur whispered in Gaynor's ears. Roy, however, heard what she said as his senses were ridiculously sharp, and he felt unpleased in his heart, but he didn't let it show on his face. He's ignorant about the rules of a foreign auction house, but that doesn't give you the right to make fun of him. "You know, we do things differently from others. We try to provide a satisfying level of service to all our customers irrespective of their background and status. That's why we are renowned. Try to change yourself, Fleur. Stop judging a book by its cover. Or you would be the first to fall out of this competitive race. I say this for your good. If the manager had coincidentally heard you making fun of a customer, he would have demoted or, worse, cancelled you. They were taught to be patient with their customers. Their job was to help them figure things out. And they were forbidden from ridiculing them. But Fleur did that one thing that could threaten her job and make her financially unstable. Her expression paled when she heard Gaynor mentioning the manager. That person did things by the book and was heartless when it came to punishing staff that broke the rules or customers that tried to take unfair advantage of the staff under his supervision. Okay, I got it. I will try to be more humble and think twice before speaking about a customer, but you must promise not to snitch on me to the manager, Fleur said in a voice that was a mixture of stress and vulnerability. I'm not the type to do that, Gaynor replied in an apologetic tone. She felt bad for reminding her about her past. Fleur was a war orphan. The war back then affected the average citizen the most, leaving many orphans. There was no set system in place to provide for them, so they were taken advantage of by nefarious people. She was 26, and it had only been a few months since she left the cage where all her earnings would usually be stolen by the abusers. And she wasn't alone in that place. There were many others. But she was lucky enough to coincidentally walk into the place the manager was taking interviews and pass it. Ever since, they dared not mess with her. But she would become their target the moment she lost the backing of the auction house. That's why she was so afraid of losing her job. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 57, in the auction house, a gem, B. They returned to their station after that. Sorry. The quality of these items is too low to be put up for auction. We don't accept raw materials extracted from level 1 to level 15 monsters. So, you were requested to take them back. Fleur pushed the boxes closer to Roy. Gaynor patted her back. She did a good job, although her actions were a little stiff. Roy rubbed the back of his head and spoke. My bad, I didn't know. Sir, it's all right. Gaynor gave him a beautiful smile. And, I have good news for you. These runestones aren't half bad and can enter the top 50 of our list easily. Many have sought us out in the past week for them. They would act as the main attraction for many guests. Their starting price would be no less than 10,000 gold coins. That I can guarantee. Then, I would leave them in your care. An official contract was established between Roy and the auction house. The party that would break its rule would face legal repression, so Roy didn't fear getting scammed by the auction house. The only headache was that it would keep 5% of the value at which the item would be sold, but no more than 1,000 gold coins. Still, putting him up for auction would undoubtedly prove to be the most profitable for him. Thus, he didn't feel wronged. Roy waved his hand over the boxes, and they all magically disappeared. That's what the onlookers saw. Actually, they entered his subspace. But it opened up in the shadow of the boxes and swallowed him instantly, so it was hard for others to tell. Subspace could be used in many ways, Roy was just finding out. I will get going then. Just as he turned to leave, Gaynor urgently ran up to him and sweetly spoke. Sir, can you spare me some of your time? I would like to have a few words with you. I promise you won't feel like having wasted time after hearing me out. Roy looked thoughtful for a moment. It would feel bad to reject her. And hearing her out might benefit him. Hence, he agreed. Okay, what do you want to tell me? I'm all ears. Gaynor wasted no time before speaking out her mind. The fur of the snow wolves, if sold as raw materials, wouldn't make you as much as selling the clothing made out of them. I've checked the quality of your fur. They're better than average. There are 2 unbelievably rare pieces of fur too. If you give them to ordinary tailors, you will make 10 times the amount compared to just directly selling the raw material in the open market. But if you pass them on to master tailors that can transform them into costumes, the profit will be 100 or maybe even thousands of times more. She stopped. He saw her looking at him. Has she gained his interest? Go on, Roy told her to continue. There are 2 groups that can make your pile of fine fur into hundreds of costumes before the fateful auction day. You might know of them. They are Bernice's tailor and the Silver Luster Hall. The first is more famous, but I request you to try them both out. They each charge a lot as a commission, but they are excellent at what they do. She said all that in one breath. Roy interrupted her jokingly. You know, I am not running anywhere. So, you can take it easy. Gaynor continued after a moment, if you have spare change and are willing to get the costumes prepared, I would put them on the list for the guest. The costumes are sought out by ordinary folks and merchants alike crazily because of their special properties and snow-like color that represents purity. So, people are bound to come flocking in huge numbers to buy them. They would be sold in no time. I would get an award for attracting customers while you would earn no less than revenue of 60,000 gold coins. You can take my words as nonsense. And if you feel like I've wasted your time, I would apologize to you. She was questioned why she thought he had the power to invest. Her reply was quite direct. A guy who could casually take out rune stones to sell and had the power of a soul stone on top of owning materials worth thousands of gold coins would surely not lack money. His subspace was mistaken as a power gained through merging with a soul stone. She was certain he was rich. That's why she struck up this lengthy conversation with him. Roy felt amazed by her. Had anyone ever told you that you have a high IQ? She was perplexed. IQ? What's that? Wait, is it a new term circulating in the Empire? Some technical terms were like a foreign language to the people of this land. Roy stopped her from overthinking by flicking her forehead. Quote dot. You're a freaking genius. You have a knack for doing business. And you good at math. He praised the lass. Gaynor wasn't flustered, but she felt happy to have been appreciated. Her words hadn't fallen on deaf ears. Thank you for your kind words. I would get 124 costumes prepared before the auction. 2 of them would be of the finest fur. You can add the names of these items to the list too. And you don't need to worry about my mind changing. Roy showed her the medallion of his family. I'm a noble. Going back on my words would do me more harm than good. She recognized he was a member of the Count's family and stopped hesitating about whether he was worthy of trust. Please give me details about how you got the rare furs, Gaynor requested humbly but in a clear voice after a plan was formulated in her mind. Uncertain of her reason, Roy felt undecided and questioned her. Why would you want that? She gave him a foxy smile and earnestly said, to have their value hyped up on the stage. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 58, Encounter with Blockheads. Roy's next destination was Bernice's Tailors. It was located in the most populated part of the county, the Southern District, where the cost of living was very high. It was a 3-story resplendent building with a large garden and on normal days would have a lot of traffic. Because it was so eye-catching, Roy caught sight of it from afar when he jumped above buildings and was saved from the trouble of asking others for direction. Is this supposed to be a tailor's shop? It's too grand. Standing on top of the rooftop, Roy praised the taste of the creator. Its architecture was grand and to his liking, and thus the sight of it came as a pleasant surprise to him. He moved towards it in the old-fashioned way, just like a martial art expert. It was forbidden to take out weapons or use magic in public, but there were no rules against using raw strength. Jumping from the rooftop of one building to another, Roy was like a giant bird flying over the head of the pedestrians down below. He could perform such a stunt with that body of his because almost all the fat in his body was mana fat, which weighed 90% less than the real deal as it was mostly mana and air. He descended into an alley near the shop, only to chance upon 3 drunk adults beating a working-class girl his age. The 3 men stepped back from the girl that was leaning pitifully against the wall and turned to the man enveloped by the darkness of the shadow in shock. Where did you come from? Don't tell me he dropped down from the roof and landed on the ground without breaking a sweat. Is he a knight? Their question was ignored by Roy. He stepped out of the shadow, walking between the bullies and the bullied, saying, what luck, I wasn't looking for trouble, but troublemakers were waiting for me on the road. Going around them isn't an option now that I have seen their sins. Beating him is the only way out. Regrets were what Roy hated the most. He would regret this moment if he just left without helping the redhead. What the heck are you? Roy was pointed out by the 3rd man, who was obviously alarmed to find a giant appearing between them and their stress-relieving plushie. He was looked down upon because of asking a stupid question. Wouldn't telling his identity to trash like them sully his name. It was better to just take him out and report to the nearest guards about their misdeeds. Me, Roy snorted, you don't need to know. He suddenly leaned forward, and a powerless step was all he took to bridge the distance between him and the 3. Whoosh! He shot a punch at the man in the middle. You'll be my sacrificial lamb to check out the power of this new stuff. Bo thrust his palm outwards. It suddenly swelled 2 times its original size and pushed through the air to welcome Roy's fist. Bam! The result was as expected. Bo was smashed into a wall. Following that was a spinning head kick that Roy landed on the guy to the right, knocking him out instantly. Thud. The man's limp body fell to the ground with a dull thud. This move set Roy's hair out of place, covering his forehead and a large area of his eyes. Even then, his glaring eyes were still visible to the bearded man standing, striking fear in his heart. Out of the 3, only he was in a condition to fight, but seeing how easily he had defeated Bo, who had used the magical power of the item they stole from the redhead, he thought against fighting him. Roy was stared at by dreadful eyes for a second before he saw the man abandoning his comrades and running away. Crazy bastards who abandon their friends at the first sight of danger are disgusting. It's just that they don't know. I will help you realize what you are. No, please. Spare me. Jeff tried to run out of the alley, but his collar was grabbed before he was yanked to the ground. Just as he was falling, a hand chop landed on the back of his neck, knocking him out. Then, Roy raised his leg and smashed it down on his guts. As a result, he woke up for a second with a crazy yell before his eyes rolled to the back of his head. He went through the pockets of each of them and even gallantly stripped them of their honor in order to see if they're hiding something beneath their clothes, and in return for seeing their hairy bodies, Roy got 3 pouches of gold and a runic item. Open hollow corner bracket ding. You've looted the southern neighborhood's looters. Congratulations. You get plus 100 gold coins, plus 1 ring of strength amplification, close hollow corner bracket. Roy inspected the runic item. Open hollow corner bracket ding. Congratulations. You gained its status screen and history. Close hollow corner bracket. The ring of strength amplification was inspected by Roy. It was an item belonging to a soldier that had succumbed to the injuries he had received in the Four Kingdoms War. It wasn't valuable as it has a finite life. The ruby on it was a runic stone. With the help of a mystifying method known only to alchemists, it was merged with the ring, granting it an element of surprise. Bo had used it when fighting Roy. So he knew what it does. Open hollow corner bracket ding. You've looted the Southern District part-time looters. Congratulations. You've gained the Thieves Who Steal from Rat title. Close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket Thieves Who Steal from Rat. Once you equip this title, your hearing and dexterity will double, and it will become easier for you to pick locks. Close hollow corner bracket. It's not worth much, but it's still a lucky catch. Roy played with it, twirling it around and throwing it in the air before catching it. Suddenly, his hands were grabbed by a feeble-looking person. Please hear me out. Who could it be if not the redhead he had saved? Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 59, Gina. Roy turned to her. Jean was bleeding from her heart, but her breath was stable, so her condition was taken as not a big deal by Roy. What do you have to say to me? Roy looked like a reasonable man, and he might be willing to listen to her, but even if he weren't, she would have her luck anyway. That's mine, she said, pointing at the ring in his hand. I came out here to throw trash when these bastards, they jumped me. I would normally be able to put a fight against these thugs with it, but they stole it at the very first second, leaving me defenseless. One hand can't win against two. That's especially true for a girl. They took me down easily and were planning to do that when you came. Thank you. Her hands went for the ring he was holding. But that's the last memory of my father. I'm thankful to you for saving me. But please return it to me. I'll work for you in return. She had a gorgeous face covered in blood, and her hair was of the same color as Amelia's, red like a ruby, enchanting and dazzling, but although she was deserving of pity, Roy wasn't just going to believe her. His inspecting gaze landed on her, and she felt like he had seen through her. Open hollow corner bracket ding. You've inspected Jean. Congratulations. You gained her attribute screen and background story. Close hollow corner bracket. Roy found out that she was, in fact, speaking the truth after reading her background story. She was an orphaned youth. The owner of the ring was her father. He had taken care of her after the war, for her mother was not there. But he was riddled with injuries, cure of which was known not to them. They were bound to part pretty soon. Faced with this harsh reality, the soldier desired not to prolong his life, but to leave behind enough wealth for his daughter to live a life of ease. He didn't teach her fighting as he wanted her to live a trouble-less life. He couldn't fight himself due to his injuries. They would flare up whenever he made a move. Thus, he put his alchemy knowledge to use, creating items that were high in demand. They were easily sold. After taking out the production cost and taxes, he was racking in a good sum. Yet, good times don't last long. Years of senseless endurance took his life. He felled 3 years ago, leaving behind a great sum of wealth for his prodigy. He had been a good father to Jean but didn't warn her against her relatives. Who would want to tell a 13-year-old that she shouldn't trust the sweet smiling aunt next door or her grandparents? That was a good way of helping her develop trust issues in the soldier's mind. He fed a lot of gold to his relatives before dying, so he thought they wouldn't harm her. But he thought wrong. The fake and greedy relatives preyed on her innocent self, looting away her wealth. Those 3 years showed her the true face of the vile world and made her realize how great her father was. He had been her shelter on rainy days and her tree in sweltering hot summer, providing her with a place to rest. After continuous betrayal, she closed her heart and became cunning. Isn't it yours? Take it. Roy tossed the ring to her. Redhead's eyes widened. She was shocked to grab it and even more bewildered to see him leave. He was leaving just like that, without demanding anything from her. They'll be out for a while. Report the situation to the guard. Tell them exactly what happened. If the situation doesn't work out well, bribe them in your favor. Just place it in their hand, and they won't dismiss the situation. Get him to lock these drunkards. Roy flicked something to Jean. It flipped an arc in the air before landing in her palm. She looked at it in vivid surprise. This was a gold coin, equivalent to her 1 month's salary. I'll repay you in the future, I promise. She bowed in his direction as he left without ever turning to look back. Roy didn't know a thing about her as there wasn't a lot mentioned about the county and its people in the novel. It started with the destruction of the Baldwin family and the start of the Chaos invasion. These people, these places, they were all set aflame, destroyed, and reduced to rubble in but 1 chapter. It would be worth fighting to change that future. Open hollow corner bracket ding. You've altered the fate of Jean. She was supposed to die today, but due to her intervention, she won't. Congratulations. You've gained the Beast Core purifying recipe, 1 times eternal weed close hollow corner bracket. Just as he stepped outside the alley and entered the big wide road that was vastly crowded, Roy's brows raised. He was taken by surprise by this sudden notification. This system was telling him to fuck up the future. Changing the fates of others could also help you gain a fortune. So why wouldn't he? He was happy. But then a thought struck him. Why didn't he gain anything from altering Swift Death's fate? Or was he still to change her fate? The rewards were inside the blue screen just like always. The eternal weed was taken out and brought close to Roy's nose. It lacked a scent, and he didn't feel anything special taking place in his body after sniffing it. So, it looks like only its name and the fact that it was hard like iron was grand. It was thrown into his subspace. His eyes then landed on the recipe with visible archaic characters. Open hollow corner bracket, would you like to learn it? Close hollow corner bracket. Yes. Open hollow corner bracket ding. Congratulations. You've learned the beast core purifying recipe. Close hollow corner bracket. Roy looked thoughtful for a moment. Beast's cores could be absorbed by humans to increase their stats, but the process was quite arduous. They have impurities. The more impurities in a beast core, the more painful one would feel while absorbing it. The impurities won't be vanishing anywhere. They would pile up inside a person's body. The immune system would kill some of them, but the rest will remain and become a hindrance to a person in the future, making it harder for them to advance or forcing sickness on them. There were purifying techniques to kill the impurity in a beast core, but there was not a single method that could kill all the impurities. However, the recipe Roy just learned granted a 100% chance of killing all impurities in a core. It was priceless. Leveling endlessly with the strongest system. Chapter 60, Roy vs. Carl. Roy was in a busy street, taking up space, so he was rightfully cursed at. Ashamed, he started walking. Across the street was a huge, grand gate. It was the entrance to Bernice's tailor. On its third floor was a private seating area. Only a handful of people could come here. Occupying it was a young girl, around the age of 18, and an old man in black. She pointed at Roy in amusement. Grandpa Blake, see that guy down there? Doesn't he seem familiar? Grand Knight Blake directed his gaze to the person that was pointed out by Bernice. Hidden behind the stainless crystal dome is a mystery covered in rumors both great and low, which is known as the Third Young Master. He resembles the rumored third son of the Fierce Sword. But, he's known to have never left the dime. What would he be doing in the southern district that's so far away from his house without escorts? Not to mention, this guy is at the perfected stage of body tempering. Looking at the way he is walking and breathing, I can tell that he can rip apart a level 10 boss monster with his hand. He must be born with divine strength. Blake unknowingly praised Roy. He is so amazing. Bernice's eyes glowed gold with holy light radiating out of them as Blake's word made her look at the sumo-like person in a new light. Blake gave her a nod. There's no way he's your brother-in-law. Bernice agreed. Yeah, no way. The street Roy entered after leaving the alley was a busy street with horse-driven carriages, roadside stalls, and a crowd. There were many who looked at him like he was a rare animal in a zoo, pointing their finger and making fun of him. Roy didn't give them a second of his life and kept his focus on the road. But sometimes, one couldn't avoid trouble even if one wanted to. Wait. I said, stop right there. Just as he was reaching for the entrance gate of Bernice's tailor, a shady figure suddenly rushed out and stopped in front of Roy, blocking his way forward. It was a man with baggy eyes and bad breath, wearing a light body armor and having a sheathed sword strapped to his side. The smell of alcohol wafted off of him, and he stood unstable, seemingly quite drunk. Open hollow corner bracket, you've inspected Carl Grayson. Close hollow corner bracket. Open hollow corner bracket, you've gained his attribute screen and character information. Close hollow corner bracket. 22 years old. Level 10. Street 24. AGT 17. Stamina 14. Open hollow corner bracket, years of debauchery have ruined his body. Among people with an opened aura gate, he is the most pathetic. Close hollow corner bracket. What? Without kindness in his eyes, Roy questioned the drunk man. Not accepting visitors, Carl replied, occasionally hicking. He took a step ahead to come offensively close to Roy and burped on his face. The smell that assaulted Roy not only made him scrunch up his nose but almost exploded his fuse. His fingers curled into a fist, but he didn't punch out, taking the county's rules into consideration. I can see people from all walks of life going in and out of the shop. Roy tried to reason with the drunk man with a deadpan face. Why are you singling me out? Do you hold some kind of prejudice against me? But his words fell on a beast's ear. How could it understand a person's words? Roy's chest was stabbed with a finger an unpleasant amount of times as Carl snorted disdainfully. Did the fat get in your eyes too, piggy? Take a careful look at them. They're neat and clean, but you look like a freak. I can smell the scent of rotten egg wafting off of you. Did I just get made fun of by a drunk bastard? Roy seethed inside. Gurgling sounds were heard from in front. Roy caught the sight of the puking Carl just in time and took a long and hasty step to the side, evading the smelly filth that shot out of Carl's mouth. It splashed on the spot Roy stood a moment ago. The people close by distanced themselves from them. Some stopped, wanting to see the show that was to begin. The other ran away. One rushed inside the shop to inform Lord Grey that his son was causing trouble again. Deep creases appeared on Roy's forehead as he frowned and looked at Carl in great disgust. Who pukes at others at the first meeting? If he hadn't moved, this bastard's puke would have surely splashed on his clothes. Roy was greatly angered by Carl. Ah, feel much better. Carl wiped his mouth and grinned at Roy. An honourable guest is having a meeting with my master inside. The sight of you might displease her. That's why I won't let you enter my shop. Come back another time. The busty woman behind Carl wrinkled up her nose and disdainfully looked at Roy. He's right. You smell of feces. She wasn't the last one to taunt Roy as another joined in. Don't even think of entering our shop without visiting a bathhouse and bringing a certificate that claims you've no infectious disease, dirty pig. The ones who taunted him were also inspected, and Roy found out that they were both Carl's wives and partners in crime that involved targeting and bullying the citizens. They were falsely claiming Roy smelled, even deaf and blind could tell that. Although he didn't smell like a flower, he also didn't have the offensive smell of a sweaty athlete. They were just silly grown-ups looking for an excuse to be an ass to Roy. But they have made one big mistake. Roy wasn't a person they could bully. He looked at them with a bewildered expression and spoke loudly and clearly. Do you three have rabies? The onlookers blinked, wondering what he was up to. No. We don't. Carl also furiously declined his accusation. No. Why do you ask? Roy smiled and, cleaning his ear with his pinky, said, because you're chewing out my ears just like a rabid dog barking at innocent pedestrians. With his sharp tongue, Roy torched them so hard that they felt burned. PFFD. The eavesdroppers failed to hold it in and laughed like they were on crack. Silence. Don't you people dare laugh at us. The target of these jeering waves, the trio, couldn't keep up the calm facade, and their expression contorted. You're like a newborn calf that hasn't learned to fear a tiger. How dare you make fun of me? You're asking for a beating. No more words were exchanged. Carl threw out an aura-infused punch, which wasn't strong but sharp enough to produce the noise of air getting cut, although barely audible, and came at Roy like a knife chopping downwards. From the get-go, Carl was using his family's offensive aura arts. If it were any other person, forget about dodging, it would be lucky if they lived to tell the tale. Roy, however, was no ordinary man. Whoosh! As the opponent's knife-like palm came down at him, Roy stood still but lifted his left hand like he was going to catch a ball. Bam! Suddenly, it sounded like a piece of wood had crashed on a solid rock after falling down a waterfall. Silence fell again. If you have the ability to make fun of others, learn to be patient when you're made fun of. Roy's words of wisdom echoed out next in the ears of the shocked crowd and Carl. Ha! Not only Carl's but also the eyes of everyone widened to the size of saucers as Gray's family wind-weaving sword-like hand was grabbed and forced to a stop by a casual grab. How could this even be possible? Bernice blurted out, looking not at all ladylike. Grandpa Blake rubbed his beard while looking at Roy in deep interest and chuckled, didn't I tell you, he can tear beasts with his bare hands. His physique is no less than a low-level boss monster. An attack of that level, if performed by a clown like Carl, would not tear his skin, no matter what. Carl was equally shocked. He couldn't make head or tail of this situation. How can you stop my sword-like palm so causally? Quote. I'm stronger than you, Roy stated with the straightest face ever made. Carl tried to free his hand, but even when he used all his strength, he couldn't yank it out of Roy's vicious grip, which made him feel as if it was not a meaty hand but iron clamps that were binding it. But he was not one to give up and admit another as his superior in a single exchange. Undoubtedly, he whipped out with his right leg, aiming the sharp end of his metallic boot toward Roy's ribs. What he didn't expect was that Roy's agility stat was 2 times higher than his, and he was also far more intelligent. Meaning Roy saw it coming and was fast enough to block it by hitting it with a downward chop and then retaliate by landing a solid slap on Carl's face. Pa! Everyone was shocked. They couldn't believe that Carl Gray, who had always been a pain in the ass for people like them, was humiliated by an unknown boy. To them, Roy was just a stranger. The Count's third son had never attended any festival, and this world was one without the internet, and the drawings of him were little to none. Because of all these reasons, what he looked like was a mystery to the people. They knew him as an incapable fatty who recently was rumored to have become a level 5 trainee, absolutely nothing like this boy who slapped a level 10 dead straight on the face. Carl rubbed his face, stunned to the bone, for he had never been slapped before.